All right, and we are live. Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our wonderful broadcast today. I am Queen Mother Nina Womack, and today is the National Day of Racial Healing. And this was created by Kellogg 7 years ago. And every January 17th, people all across the United States and all around the world come together to discuss racial healing and what we can do to heal. Today we have some wonderful guests. The co-host, my co-host is Prophet Anyanwu Cox. She will introduce herself, and let's just go across the board and introduce ourselves, everyone. Prophet, you're up.
Well, happy day of racial healing to everyone. I am Prophet Anyanwu Cox. So glad to be here today to share some knowledge with you. This is an educational piece today to bring to you some knowledge that we find that is not commonly known, not just across the United States, but actually across the world. So get your pen and paper so you can take some notes. We'll also have an opportunity for you to go to the Facebook page of Queen Mother Nina Womack and put some of your ideas. But it's just good to be here. We both are holistic practitioners. We work in the realm of healing all the time. So this is no different. This is the day of healing racial trauma, healing racial relations and conditions that brought us to this point. And I'll pass it over to Prince Andrew Williams.
Well, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'm very honored to be here with these queens and with these people that I respect highly. I'm Andrew Williams Jr. However, you can find more about me at andrewnetworks.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prince Andrew. All right,
Short
and
and sweet.
Michelle.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Michelle Armster, and I am here with the invitation from Prophet Anyawu Cox. I am here also because I attended the Durban in 2001, and but I also think that racial healing is spiritual work, and that it's part of how and that in spiritual work and is also that physical work. And so it's important to have these conversations as we are all trying to manifest the divine in our lives.
Ashe. Ashe. So this is our intro, and we're going to have our intro for a minute and then introduce Prophet Cox. She will do some libations, opening libations before we get into the program.
Moyuba fefeiku. Moyuba fefeiku. Moyuba fefeiku. Moyuba fefeiku. Ikuo. Ente la se yo bae gungun. Ikuo. Ente la se yo bae gungun. Moyuba.
Again, our National Day of Racial Healing today. It is uh, broadcast and sponsored by Let's Be Whole, along with our other partners. The Institute, Prophet Cox's organization. We also have Andrew Networks um, and the Peace Coalition. And this is a little bit about Let's Be Whole. We take a whole health approach to your complete well being, and these are some of our services. So, this is why Let's Be Whole is putting on this program today to help us be whole and heal from any kind of trauma we have, such as racial trauma, emotional childhood trauma, and so forth. So thank you. And Prophet Cox, tell everybody the name of your organization and what you do with the Institute, the International Institute.
Thank you so much. I'm co-founder of the International Institute for Health and Wellness, as well as, if you see the flyer, also the founder of Reconciliation Ministry Without Walls, and co-founder with my daughter, Dr. Deborah Stubblefield, for the Safe Healthy Spaces. And they all deal with healing in one way or another. Safe Healthy Spaces deal specifically around racial healing, trauma among people of African descent, as well as allies. The International Institute of Health and Wellness deals with holistic, so we have practitioners who cover all areas: Reiki, healing touch, yoga, just a large array of alternative essential oils, therapeutic grade, shamanic. We have prophetic giftings. Many of us, well, all of us have some ability. We all have the ability, let me change that, to be able to tap into that divine self and to be able to get information and support for our healing. The Reconciliation Ministry, which deals with reconciling, and the philosophy, the model, so to speak, for the Reconciliation Ministry is that in order for all this healing to happen, we reconcile ourselves to ourselves. Know thyself. We reconcile ourselves to the divine, whoever that God is of your heart and understanding, and then we reconcile ourselves with all of creation. So that's sort of a quick summary. Thank you so much.
Ashe, Ashe. All right, so let's start with our opening libations.
So turn the drums on just a little bit. So we're opening up as we do in African Centered Circles. We open with a libation. Libation is a ritual, it's a common African ritual that occurs across the continent. It actually happens in other cultures as well. The libation, the word libation, deals with the liquid that is poured. In this case, we're going to use water. And I have my little libation cup here, and I have my plant that is waiting to be refreshed. And I pour the water into the plant. As I read a libation statement, after each statement, I invite you, wherever you are, to respond with the word Ashe. It's one of the terms we use, and it simply means it's a call and response where I will speak and then you will respond as well. But the Ashe is our decree, so to speak. It actually means it is established just as we have said. And so when we speak these things, we know that they are true, in fact, and we declare to do so. Queen Mother, can we turn the drums off? Yeah,
I think that's someone's.
or if everyone can mute.
Can everyone mute?
And so
Okay.
on this National Day of Racial Healing, and we're going to focus heavily on the Durban Declaration and Program of Action and some other topics as well. But one of the things that the Durban Declaration and Program of Action includes is the right to honor our history, the right to be involved in our culture, the right to remember those who have come before us. And so we do that today. And we begin, I would pour the libation after each, and we will all say Ashe. So we begin first with pouring libation for the great Almighty God of all creation, our provider, healer, protector, miracle worker, restorer, redeemer of lost time and stolen legacy. We pour a libation for the God, the releaser of secret treasures and the deep mysteries of heaven. Ashe.
Ashe.
We pour a libation, and you can unmute for this portion of it. We pour libation for Africa, the motherland, cradle of civilization. Ashe.
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 We pour libation for the traditional African principles of Ubuntu, which says we are, I am because we are. We pour libation for Sawubona, which says, I see you, we see you. We see the spiritual, divine, powerful being that you are. We
Mm.
pour libation for Mayat and for the
Mm.
Nguza Saba. May these principles guide us in all that we do, remembering always that we are each other's medicine. Ashe.
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 We pour libation for the ancestors and their indomitable spirits, for the sacred knowledge they entrusted to us, for their resiliency and their strong, proud shoulders upon which we stand. Ashe.
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 And as we remember those ancestors, we pour libation especially today for those who were involved in the Durban Declaration and Program of Action, the conference that brought this document together, for those who labored even before then, for those who have gone on, who put in decades and decades of work and labor and sweat. We remember them today to say, we are here today with this document that you sacrificed for, paid money to get to try to be a part of, all the labor you put in. We are here today standing on your shoulders, and we say, Ashe.
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 We pour libation for the elders who are still with us, who have labored for those decades, and from whose shoulders and whose struggle and whose wisdom we can learn much, and we can also refer to them and their wisdom so that we can keep going and draw on their work and their struggle to be able to go yet another day. Ashe.
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 We pour libation for our youth who represent our hope, the fruit of our labor, and our promise for tomorrow. We make space for them as we continue to share our wisdom and our gifts. Ashe.
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 And for our people, the original people, the African people who journey out to explore, populate, yes, populate every race on the planet and establish human life across the earth. Ashe.
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 Moyuba fefeiku.
And we say Moyuba Fefe Iku.
Moyuba
Moyuba Fefe Iku means we have
fefeiku.
love and respect for the ancestors. We do not
Moyuba.
forget those who have gone before us.
Moyuba
And we say Ashe. And one quick,
fefeiku.
we also like to do some African or ancestor quote. And so today, what we choose is one from the Honorable Marcus Garvey Sr., which simply says, Up, you mighty race, accomplish what you will. And because today's program is not just race as it relates to people of African descent, it's human race. So we're saying, using the words of Honorable Marcus Garvey, Up, you mighty race, yes, we can get this done. Ashe, Ashe all.
Ashe.
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 Mm. Ashe.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So, again, today is the National Day of Racial Healing. This is the seventh annual year. This was originally initiated by the Kellogg Foundation. If you guys know about Kellogg, the big brand, they have a foundation that is headed by a woman of African descent, the CEO. And so she started this initiative, or the foundation rather, to address racial healing. Like Prophet Cox said, it is just not for people of African descent, but there are racial discrimination of all races. The Israel and Palestine, Asian, the Chinese. After we had this pandemic, you saw that there was a lot of discrimination against people of Asian descent. And so today is to eradicate and have discussions about all of it and how we can heal, how we can come together as one human family. Um, because I am a Pan Africanist and a Black woman, a woman of African descent, my purpose in life is to help bring healing to people of African descent. And then from there, we can move on and make sure that other nationalities and ethnicities and so forth also have that healing as well. Okay, so before we go into what is number one, in order for us to know about racial healing, we have to understand about human rights. And so we will watch some videos shortly that explain human rights. And we think that, oh, human rights, okay, yes, everybody needs, deserves human rights. But let's really understand what human rights are and how our lives are affected by not having human rights or having human rights as human beings. So we will get into that next. Our we have a word of encouragement, a word about human rights, and today by Queen Mother Kathleen Harmon. So let's watch her video first to open up this about human rights and racial healing. Ashe.
My name is Queen Mother Kathleen Harmon. I am 91 years old, still on the battlefield, fighting for the injustice and the freedom for our people. I'm also CEO of Peace Coalition. Today is the National Day of Racial Healing. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Queen Mother Nina and Prophet Cox for allowing me this great opportunity. As today we should be focusing on the healing. How can we and what can we do to make change? I'm really wanting healing. I'm really wanting healing. What can we do to heal? And I ask you today, won't you see and do whatever you can to be a partaker of national healing? This really identifies with the African American culture for the simple reason that we were part of that era when our grandparents were in slavery. I was born in 1931 during the Depression and Second Civil War. And then when I look today, we're going back. I'm making comments on these issues because it's showing that we reliving the same as we did 20, 40, 50, 60 years ago. What have we really accomplished? This is why we really need national healing. This is why we really, really need to come together and focus and educate. I think education is a key component. None of our children know anything about the enslaved of my grandparents and our grandparents and their foreparents. Our schools were discriminated. The blacks could not go to school with the whites. We had our own school. We had to walk miles and miles and miles in the cold, the snow. Our hands were frozen. We still can't go to any college that we want to go. There's still racial overtone. We were robbed of the voting right. Why don't they know? Why isn't it in the history book? Talk about change. We must come together. In 2023, thank Prophet Cox and thank Queen Mother for opening the door that at least we can have discussion, educate, and help our children to understand. My question today is, what do we do to make change? When we have the opportunity to elect our officers, legislators, and all of our city council, etc., we need to be a part of that. We must come together. We must unite. We must educate, mobilize, and most of all, be sure that we have the right to vote. Be sure that we are partakers and not just sit back. We must be vocal. We must move. There is so much money in the United States of America and every other race is always given, but our race is far left behind. We have no funding, and we must stand up and be accountable. We must fight for our justice, and there is no justice. There is still racial overtone all over this country, and we must change that. Just last week, I had the opportunity to listen to the report from Queen Mother Blakely, who attended the conference in Geneva, and find out all of the changes that was made. And that's what I'm saying. We are not educated. We are not unified. We don't know on one side of the country we're doing one thing. We've got to come to unity, and we are moving forward. My councilwoman sits on the appropriation committee, which is very strongly here in California and have been passed by our governor. And on the 28th and the 29th, I will be attending the conference. And we are moving to make sure, come up with a number that we should be requesting. Just don't ask for appropriation and money. We need to put a price on it, and we need to demand, as Queen Mother say, cut the check now. We got to unify, come together. We are separate and divided, and that's the reason we are left out and out of the equation. We're not fighting for the injustice. We need to work with our assemblies and change the legislation, change the law. See that our children do not do 25 and 30 years, and see that the courts do not send our kids off plea bargain and selling themselves. Yeah. We need to change the legislation. And that's what I'm working on. I'm working with our council people, I'm working with our assembly, and I want to say I am so proud of my assemblywoman, Akila Weber, Dr. Keela Weber, who has done an outstanding job in making sure that the laws are being changed. Just this past year, January, her bill was passed that the police can no longer, they have to make sure that whatever they charge the children with, that they have proof to do that. But I do know that my heart is really, really hurting and is saddened. And that's why I am the advocate. And that's why I work so hard to make sure that our children are covered and justice is done. Thank you so much for the opportunity that I, at 91 years of age, had the opportunity to share with you today on the National Day of Healing.
Ashe.
Ashe, Ashe. Still on the battlefield.
Yes.
All right.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Can you imagine? Prince Andrew, can you go? We're going to start addressing what is human rights, but if you could say a few
I need to jump
words.
in. Are we recording? I was hoping we were recording.
Excuse me?
Are we recording? I couldn't tell.
Yes, this is recorded. Uh-huh.
All right,
Yeah,
thank you. Sorry.
no problem. Prince Andrew, if you could explain to the audience about human rights and the importance of us understanding what human rights are before we go into the next video.
Well, thank you. I have a personal take on that, and I do appreciate you providing me this opportunity. I'm here in Los Angeles, California. Just yesterday, we had the Martin Luther King Day parade here in Los Angeles, one of the largest in the world. But we also, excuse me, excuse me, Martin Luther King himself is very important to me because I've lived a life, I have lived experience of racial trauma and mental emancipation that both began with the April 4th, 1968 assassination of Dr. King, when a white female clerk from whom I had been buying my comic books and newspapers warned me to keep my hands off of those or I'd end up dead like that nigger King. Now, totally confused, I asked my mother what she meant.
Mm.
And after taking me back to chastise a woman and get her to apologize, we went back home where we had what we call the talk. My mom explained to me that all of Earth at one time was one time connected all together in one landmass, and that the first people from the place we now call Africa spread throughout the entire world, and they reflect the entire rainbow of people, a rainbow of colors that we now see in people. She also explained that I'm a child of those first people. And she meant then what President Joe Biden said at the Atlanta Ebenezer Church on January 15th of 2023, that Emma, that I represent the soul of America. But she said and meant that I represent the soul of mankind. She charged me with the task of first surviving in this world that I was born into, but then striving to find a way to reconnect and heal our worldwide family of all shades and origins. That's my responsibility. And that was also the realization and my key to me achieving mental emancipation at 10 years old that failed, that caused me to see that my immediate circumstances were not my limitations. I am a global citizen. The entire world is my oyster, so to speak. And that shapes my message to you in 2023. Yes, today we recognize and celebrate today as the National Day of Racial Healing. On the one hand, while we acknowledge that the United States, like many other countries, have refused to acknowledge the Durban Declaration as a blueprint to combating global racism, xenophobia, and intolerance. So I call upon you as a global citizen to wrap yourself in the power of the underlying foundation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, specifically human right number 29. And that's to take responsibility, to move beyond the gesture of just showing up today to talk about a day of racial healing and truly become a drum major for peace, as Dr. King urged us to do, and dedicate yourself throughout the entire year to celebrate this 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on December 10th of 2023 by increasing the knowledge of the universality and indivisibility of human rights and empower people to fight for their rights, especially our young people, not just in our quote African American community in the United States, but on a worldwide basis as we all move together in unity. So thank you very much, Queen Mother. I do have a brief video about the 30 human rights, but I did put that in the chat as well. So please tell me how to proceed. But thank you so much for this opportunity.
Sure, sure. You are so welcome. I will pull it up shortly, but let's get into the next video about human rights. And then we will go into those 30 human rights. I would like to welcome our next guest, Safiwi. He had a prior engagement, but is now joining us. So if you could just greet the audience and say hello, and we'll get to the video.
And your
And
location.
Sumba, that is greetings in my ancestral tongue. Greetings. It literally means I taste you. So just as when we put food in our mouth and it becomes one with our bodies, when we come into the presence of each other, we say Nsumba, I taste you, meaning we have become one together. So Nsumba, greetings. Thanks for inviting me, to this event and to talk about these things that are so important, the Durban Declaration. Really
Yes,
appreciate it.
yes, yes. So yes, you guys, please stay
And
online.
really
Share.
quick, Queen Mother, where are you calling in from, Sapiwa?
I am Calling in from my ancestral homeland, I'm in Guinea-Bissau, which is in West Africa.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So I want you guys to stay tuned because we are going to get into a very important document that the United Nations um, and local and international governments, I'm sorry, international governments created, called the Durban Declaration. So we will get into that shortly. But before we get into that, we do need to understand what human rights are and how it has affected us as people of African descent as well as other races. So let's get into human rights right now.
Where, after all, do universal human rights begin?
After World War II, it was clear that the horrors of the war should never be allowed to occur again. Founded in 1945, the United Nations sought to prevent future atrocities by affirming, in its foundational charter, faith in fundamental human rights, the dignity and worth of the human person, and a commitment to promote better standards of life in larger freedom. In the years that followed, member states of the United Nations strived to develop the human rights provisions of the Charter and capture them in a single document. It took 3 years to agree on a common vision. On the 10th of December, 1948, the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations.
Still, it is the first step in a great evolutionary process. It is the first occasion on which the organised community of nations has made a declaration of human rights and fundamental freedoms, and it has the authority of the body of opinion of the United Nations as a whole. And millions of people, men and women and children all over the world, will turn for hope and guidance and inspiration to this document.
While history alone can determine the historic significance of an event, it is safe to say that the declaration before us may be destined to occupy an honorable place in the procession of positive landmarks in human history.
The Declaration consists of a preamble and 30 articles, with Article 1 powerfully proclaiming that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. No discrimination, right to life, liberty and security, no slavery, no torture or cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment, equal protection of the law, no arbitrary arrest, detention or exile, fair and public hearing, no arbitrary interference with privacy, right to freedom of movement, right to seek and enjoy asylum, right to a nationality, right to marry and to found a family, right to property, freedom of thought, conscience and religion, freedom of opinion and expression, freedom of peaceful assembly and association, right to take part in government, right to work, right to rest and leisure, right to food, clothing, housing, medical care and social services, right to education, right to participate in cultural life.
These human rights are not country-specific. They are not a reward for good behavior or particular to a certain era or social group. They are the rights of people of every color, from every race and ethnic group, whether or not they have disabilities, citizens or migrants, no matter their sex, their class, their caste, their creed, their age, or sexual orientation.
The Declaration has generated action for human rights protection in many ways. It has inspired hundreds of human rights instruments that together constitute international human rights law and a number of international bodies and mechanisms for human rights protection. The principles of the Declaration have supported the decolonization struggle and have been enshrined in the constitutions of the newly established countries which have joined the United Nations. The Declaration has inspired national and regional human rights protection systems, including legislation and institutions. And it continues to guide the work of human rights defenders and advocates worldwide. Today, the Declaration is available in more than 500 languages and dialects, and it has obtained the Guinness World Record for the most translated document in the world. The 10th of December, the day on which the Declaration was adopted, is celebrated each year as Human Rights Day. The Declaration emphasizes the relevance of human rights in our daily lives.
Where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places, close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm, or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman, and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. Without concerted citizen action to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the larger world.
Ashe. Ashe.
Ashe.
So that was an overview of human rights. And when we look at people of African descent all across the globe, have our human rights been violated? Yes.
Absolutely.
The truth is yes. For many, many years, our rights have been violated. And what are we going to do as citizens, like Eleanor Roosevelt said? What are we going to do to stand up for our human rights? And that's where the Durban Declaration comes in, which we'll find out about. Anybody have a comment?
Yeah, I think that was really a great visual and history, sort of all summed up in that short video. The idea that the principles are there, that somehow through the 3 years of deliberation they came up with something that now we know the reality of systemic racism, and we know that applies to the U.S. Constitution and a lot of other documents. That what the work becomes is how to, but it's not in this case, and sticking with the theme for this particular day, since this deals more with the human family. And just to say to those who are watching, this is the first of a 3-part series. In June, we're going to delve into some of the controversy around the Durban Declaration. Today, we're focusing on healing of the human race. And so, but the idea is that for anyone really, because there's so much human trafficking that includes people across the globe of all races, all ages, all genders, that personally, when I took a look at the Durban Declaration, the migrants, the refugees, and all the different categories that I don't necessarily consider every day, because as a elderly Black female, I have so many other things that come before that. But when I read it, it was very heartbreaking to even think about how much pain there is on the planet at all levels, in every group. And somehow the human race as a whole has been traumatized, and that it has been traumatized by human beings of all races. I don't think there's any group that has not been touched by the pain, by the injury, and I don't know of any group that has not participated in causing pain. So today, as we look at the overall, I'm just so really glad, and I really, too, Queen Mother, Her Highness Nina Womack, who invited me to this platform today, because this is a major, major deal. looking, and we'll go into the Durban Declaration, but when I started to get into it and study it, there was something spiritual that lifted off the pages. And that's why I think with the libation and with the ancestors, regardless of who they are, whether they were those who were shackled in the bottom of the ships, whether they were those kept in the, which would have been kept in the dungeons in Africa, whether they're people escaping from pain and trauma, in other parts of the world, in the south of the world, in the north of the world, wherever that it's happened. Regardless of how it happens, it's like this is the day. This is the day that we stop and remember that yes, there's a term from Izulu called Sawubona, which I mentioned earlier. We see you. So today we want to say to everyone who's been touched by trauma, who's been touched by pain, who is involved in this not having human rights, not having your needs met, we want to say we see you. And we're dedicating this to you today. And in June, we will come back around to a courageous conversation about what is going on with all the disagreements and all the hostilities around the Durban Declaration. And hopefully by December, which is Human Rights Day, hopefully by then we will find that we have made at least a few steps forward in being able to come together in a real way. And thank you so much for letting me make those comments.
Absolutely. Does anybody else have anything to say? Michelle?
Yes, so it's important for me to do one thing. I am sitting in Wichita, Kansas, in the United States. And so it's important for me to acknowledge the original people of this land, the Kaw, the Wichita, the Pawnee, and many others whose names we've lost, whose languages we've lost, and acknowledge that they too had families, they too had language, they too had a faith. And I also, and that I sit and I reside on stolen land. And I also acknowledge my ancestors, the stolen people from the continent of Africa, the Mende of Sierra Leone, and the Bassa of Burkina Faso. And, so when we talk about the United African American experience, or even talking about the United States, we're talking about a country built on stolen land, and we're talking about a country that has thrived and survived on stolen labor. So it's important for me to acknowledge these two as we talk about indigeneity and as we talk about human rights. But I also want to, hold the kernel of truth is that we are still here. So we have defied the lie. The indigenous brothers and sisters have defied the lie. They are still here. And as a person of African descent here in the United States, me and my ancestors and all have defied the lie. And so there's strength in who we are, and there's resilience in who we are. But you know what? I tend to, but resilience does mean that I'm going to take it. That's one of the things. People use that resilience word, and then I'm going, no, I don't want to be resilient. So, and the second thing that I want to say at this time is that I was in Durban. And I just wanted to share one story. While I was in Durban, there was a gathering. It was called a People of Color Caucus. And as C.T. Vivian got up there to speak, we heard this singing coming from outside the tent. And then all of a sudden, these sisters, these women who had their blankets out in front of the UN gathering, these women who were had made things and were selling their wares, they came into this tent. They were singing at the top of their voice. They were dancing, and then they started speaking from the aisles. And Dr. C.T. Vivian invited them to the microphone, and they said, "We are the people who need to be here. We are the people that this impacts. But we can't afford to." I mean, we can't afford to be here. But they they sang at the top of their voices, and they made their presence known. And I thought, this is the way you do that. You do the change. You break into a space singing and clapping and dancing, and then you make your voice heard. So I just wanted to just share that as we talk about human rights, and as we talk about what does it mean to begin the healing process. Because the reality is, this has been going on since 1492, when the so-called Mr. Columbus said he found some land like it had no people here. And then we talk about 1619. This has been going on for over 400 years. And so we need to give ourselves grace and patience, and as we begin this healing process. It took 600 years for us to get to this point. We need to be clear that it's going to take some time as we begin that unpacking. So I just wanted to state that.
So, Elder, before you settle back in your chair, so do you remember the song? She also sings. She does storytelling. She does a lot of stuff. Is there a one-liner song or something that you can because we have a little bit of leeway in the program since we're the ones doing it. So do you have something on something?
Yeah, there's something that always comes to mind for me as I continue to be engaged and involved in this work, and it's an old spiritual, and it says, if I could help somebody as I travel on, if I could help somebody with a word or a song, if I could help somebody see where they're going wrong, then my living will not be in vain.
Ashe.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. So yes. Today again is the National Day of Racial Healing. I am just going to be upfront that my priority is to help bring forth the racial healing for people of African descent, for us to have restitution, reparations, because our human rights have been violated for so long. Our human rights continue to be violated, and we must stand up in unity. Like Queen Mother Harmon said earlier, we must unite, and we must continue this fight, that we deserve restitution for all the pain and suffering that our ancestors have gone through, what we continue to go through, and so forth. So I just want to be upfront with that I am going to be and am very vocal about our restitution for people of African descent. Ashe.
Ashe.
Ashe. All right. So on that note, let's go into the decade of people of African descent. I don't know if you guys do or don't know, but the United Nations declared 10 years dedicated to people of African descent, and it ends next year in 2024. So what can we do? How can we come together and unite in this year? 360, 60 days left or something like that, to really come out with the bang. So let's watch this video.
The years 2015 to 2024 have been designated by the United Nations as the International Decade for People of African Descent. Around 200 million people in the Americas identify themselves as being of African descent. Many millions more live in other parts of the world outside of the African continent. People like Irvin Simmons in the United States, Sandra dos Santos in Brazil, and Imran in India are all descendants of African slaves. These descendants often constitute some of the poorest and most marginalized groups, with limited access to quality education, health services, housing, and social security. Men, women, and children were brought here from Africa to work on plantations, growing indigo, rice, and cotton, turning a profit for their masters. But all that changed in 1861, when the Civil War broke out, largely over slavery, pitting states in the South against those in the North. More than 1,000 freed slaves settled here on Daufuskie Island, but only 13 descendants of slaves occupy the island today. They're struggling to uphold their rights to inherited land that is now prime real estate.
There must be a way that they could address people who have always had their land, no fault of their own, been impacted by development.
In Brazil, during the transatlantic slave trade, some 4 million slaves were brought from Africa to Salvador de Bahia. They worked under extreme conditions on sugar plantations, a commodity that changed international trade during colonialism, boosting Brazil's economy. Sandra dos Santos' ancestors fled oppression and violence and formed the Quilombo of Danda. They called themselves Quilomboles, a Brazilian term for people of African origin. For Sandra, conflict never ceased.
Vinha trator para derrubar, né? Aqui veio muita questão de conflito. Quando a gente plantava, que chegava lá no outro dia, havia tudo destruído.
Sandra fought to keep the land her ancestors worked for centuries.
E aí foi no momento que eu parti, né? Me se tornei uma líder. Chega em sofrimento, abaixa meus bisavôs, meus avós, agora meus pais. Eu não vou querer isso, né? Futuramente.
After months of legal battles, a new law allowed her to remain here. Centuries ago, Africans from Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia sailed to the Indian subcontinent as merchants, while others were brought as slaves. The cities say they were elite slaves serving the ruling class only. Thousands more were brought to India in the 19th century. Among them were Imran's ancestors. With the passage of time, some escaped slavery, establishing communities in forested areas. Imran is providing for himself through dance, and when he's not dancing, he works in the Gir forest as a guide.
कॉलेज जाता है तो कोई जॉब मिल जाता है फॉरेस्ट में मिल जाता है आर्मी वगैरह में मिल जाते हैं तो थोड़े बहुत वैसे हो जाते हैं तो मकान अपने आप कर लेते हैं.
To help the descendants of slaves and those of African heritage, the United Nations created an international decade for people of African descent. Launched in January 2015, the decade runs through December 2024. The decade aims to celebrate the important contribution of people of African descent worldwide, advance social justice and inclusion policies, eradicate racism and intolerance, promote human rights, and assist in creating better, more prosperous communities in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, spearheaded by the United Nations.
Ashe.
Ashe, Ashe.
So that is the decade, the International Decade for People of African Descent. Now we are going to get into the Durban Declaration, which is what we really want the audience to be aware of. But before we get into that, Prince Andrew will need to leave for another engagement. So we thank his time spent with us. And anybody want to say anything before we go into the Durban now, the next segment?
Just that one of the reasons why we're focusing today, this is the National Racial Healing Day, and there are all kinds of activities happening around the United States around healing conversations. I've gone to dinners with different diverse populations. I've gone to a lot of activities on this particular day around this issue, but we chose today to bring the Durban Declaration and Program of Action to the public. So this is really not today's platform event is not so much for the scholars who know the information. We're happy to have and really grateful to have Elder Reverend, almost Dr. Michelle Armstead here, who was actually boots on the ground when it occurred. But it's such an important document. It's stirring up a lot of controversy around the world. Yet I find that as I talk to everyday people who are, of course, every day trying to live their life and take care of everyday issues, they've never heard of this document. So we decided to make this a day of education. So it's like you're in a classroom. That's why I said get your pencil and paper. There'll be things that come up. It may even be dry in some places because it's information. And one of the things I discovered for myself is I didn't have the basic information. So we want you to leave here today with the basic information. We'll give you some tools that you can research yourself. We'll also have a Facebook group that you can join and put your questions, your concerns. We'll be looking for to give you your answers. We also want to have some conversations in the community around this topic. And then in June, we want to have a panel of experts on who are the scholars around it, whether they're pro or con. And we want you to be ready to come there with the full knowledge of what. So the theme today is what's in it. We said Durban Declaration and Program of Action. There's a lot of pages and a lot of information, but what's in it? So we want you to have that. We also have Brother Sapiwe Balika, who was in Geneva with me in December, and I call him a genius. Sometimes he thinks I'm kidding. Hopefully he doesn't now, because I say it so many times. Even if I was kidding in the beginning, I've said it so much it has to be law. So, but he has a ton of information. Again today, I'm hoping he'll be with us in June, but we just want to make sure that leave no one behind in the knowledge of it. So when it comes up in your community, in your state, in your nation, you will know what it is. And so that's how we make decisions and act on it. So, and become an advocate from your own living room, become an advocate. All right. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And also we have an audio book of what's in the declaration, the different declarations. It's 143, which is quite a lot. And, in today's society, we don't really like to read. So we have created an audio book where you can listen. You can listen at your convenience and get to understand it because, again, it deals with crimes against humanity, crimes against violation of our human rights, and people of African descent. Is included in that. So we need to be educated about it. So now we are going to play an intro video about the Durban Declaration, so everybody can understand our human rights and what this document was all about.
We hold it as an inviolable principle that racism must be opposed by all the means that humanity has at its disposal. Wherever it occurs, it has the potential to result in a systematic and comprehensive denial of human rights to those who are discriminated against. This is because all racism is inherently a challenge to human rights, because it denies the view that every human being is a person of equal worth with any other.
The build-up to this conference has prompted an extraordinary mobilization of society in many different countries. It has raised expectations which we must not disappoint.
We must join hands and work together to achieve a constructive, substantive agenda. Racism is truly a global issue, and we need it to be discussed at the global level, however sensitive and difficult that may be.
Today, apartheid lies dead, but sadly, racism lives on in all regions and in all societies. It's time to acknowledge and repair long-standing wrongs and reverse their consequences.
Despite what we've been through as Asian Americans and as New Yorkers, we're still here fighting every day for our shared future.
The pain that I went through, it was horrific watching my brother pass away. He was tortured to death. That was a modern day execution.
Systemic racism is a set of racialized norms that have been embedded in our law, our policy, our practices. And what it's done is really licensed atrocity.
In light of these profound and wide-ranging injustices, there is an urgent need to confront the legacies of enslavement, the transatlantic slave trade, colonialism and successive racially discriminatory policies and systems, and to seek reparatory justice.
We forgive, but we don't forget. It's a long past. We are human beings. You know, we can forgive man to man, but we will never forget. And even those people who did it should never forget, so that never again humanity will be faced with such kind of atrocity.
If we don't fight together, racism will kill us all. I don't want to suffocate in a world enamored of hate. I want to breathe. I want to breathe in the sweet and rejuvenating air of compassion and cooperation. I want to live fully. I want to extend the gift of a full, unconstricted life to all people around the world. Will you join me?
Ashe, ashe.
Ashe.
So let's get into what the declaration actually is. Safiwi or Michelle, would you like to take the lead?
Michelle was, Mama Michelle was there, but let me kind of give an understanding so that everybody can really kind of understand the significance of this. We have just experienced this pandemic that has affected all people all over the globe in a very sensational way. Imagine if this pandemic had evolved for 500 years, and only after 500 years, the United Nations and the global community said, oh, we need to come together now and do something about this because it's the negative effect that it is having on people everywhere. So one way to think about the World Conference Against Racism is to understand that this was the moment that the world said, we must come together and once and for all come up with a solution for racism. Which before climate justice, we have all these climate justice conferences that the UN sponsors because it affects everybody. We have all these COVID conferences. Before those two issues, racism was the thing threatening all of humanity. And so the World Conference Against Racism was that moment where over 18,000 delegates from all levels of society, all classes of people, all walks of life, all positions of authority, government, civil society, everything came together to finally solve this problem. And what came out of that was this document called that we refer to as the Durban Declaration and Program of Africa. So I just wanted to kind of start off by giving that kind of understanding for maybe some of our younger viewers. And then I'll throw it back over to you, Mama Michelle, if you want to take the lead since you were there.
Well, you did an absolutely wonderful job, and I've made a note. I really appreciate you making that connection with the pandemic, and because that's the more immediate. What I can say in reflecting on the World Conference Against Racism, it was all people there, and what I recall just clearly is that the United States was bound and determined to not sign it from the gate. That wasn't going to happen and didn't happen. But it does not mean that we don't continue to do what we need to do to bring about racial justice. There were many different caucuses and meetings and delegations, and so it was a powerful experience. But I really feel like you really said it well by stating that racism was the pandemic that had been going on for hundreds of years when the World Conference Against Racism happened, and what was most meaningful, I think, was for me as a person of African descent born in America, that there were so many other countries and peoples who supported it that, United States just looks stupid. I mean, there's no other way to, like, we really did not look good at all. I mean, that's what I would say. But I always look for places of hope. And one of the most meaningful experiences that I had in Durban was the invitation from the indigenous African people. And they invited all of us from the diaspora to come, and we marched to the ocean, and there was drumming by the ocean, and it was a welcome home ceremony. And so there was the pouring of the libations and the fire, and I'm looking at people saying, "You look like my cousin," you know what I mean? And we could not talk because we spoke different languages. See, so those moments, that's what I hold on the most when I think about the World Conference Against Racism, is that welcome home ceremony that they had, where I sat next to a sister and we held hands. She was from Brazil. We could not speak. We did not speak the same language, but we spoke the language of our heart, and that transcended everything there.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So, basically, the Durban Declaration, I want to read something. The Durban Declaration reaffirms core principles of equality and non-discrimination. The program of action, which was in the document, emphasizes states, all the states around the world, primary responsibility for combating racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance, recommending clear mechanisms for achieving a more fair, just, and equitable society. For those of you that don't know about xenophobia, that is when you have an aversion or a fear from people of other cultures, so that could be Black, Asian, Hispanic, whatever. That is basically what xenophobia is. So this declaration serves as a practical guide for states to design and implement comprehensive reforms in various sectors at all levels and honor their commitments towards combating racism and discrimination. The Durban Declaration recommends that states adopt national action plans to promote diversity, equality, equity, social justice, and the participation of all, with plans that are comprehensive in scope and address historical wrongs. So, again, when all these countries came together in 2001, we had China, we had Brazil participated, America, Michelle was there. So many people came together, and so many governments came together and agreed. They all came together in unity and agreed, okay, this is how, this is the best practices to combat racism and discrimination. We recommend that you provide compensation for people of African descent. So back to the reparations, they recommended that that should be done. And like Michelle said, for whatever reason, the United States did pull out of that. But the United Nations and internationally, globally, everybody agrees that people of African descent should have reparations, should have compensation, that we need help. They recommended that we get help with education, with housing, with land. It's in 143 principles in that document. So that is what the Durban Declaration is about. And
Queen,
go on.
yeah, can I read a couple things real quick?
Sure.
There's a couple of things. I have the book here, and I really it became something that's interesting when you can't really see it. Okay. It was something I picked up and thought I could run through it, and I couldn't. And so, as you can see on my tabs and on my highlighting, I had to look up words because some of the words I wasn't real sure what they were. But anyway, so it is something that as we go forward, we're giving you some basic information today, an audiobook. We want to make sure that you are, informing your own opinions about it, but at least know what's in it. So there were a couple of things that I put some stars next to. I'll read one of them. It says this is reaffirming the principles of equality and non-discrimination in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and encouraging respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms for all without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinions, national or social origins, property, birth, or other status. So it's designed to be inclusive. Here's another one that I highlighted a bunch of stuff, but I can't read all of it. But it's what number is this? Number 13, under sources, causes, forms, and contemporary manifestations of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerances, which they repeat over and over and over again here, so you kind of get that in. But it says, we acknowledge that slavery and the slave trade, including the transatlantic slave trade, were appalling tragedies in the history of humanity, not only because of their abhorrent barbarism, but also in terms of their magnitude, organized nature, and especially their negation of the essence of the victims, and further acknowledge that slavery and the slave trade are a crime against humanity and should always have been so. Always should have been considered a crime, especially the transatlantic slave trade, and are among the major sources and manifestations of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance, and that Africans and people of African descent, Asians and people of Asian descent, and indigenous peoples were victims of these acts and continue to be victims of these consequences. So again, acknowledging that it wasn't just kind of not a good thing to do, it was a real issue. And so and it goes in the Durban Declaration covers it over and over and over again. So they later on they talk about that another important thing that's being worked on even there in California where Queen Mother is and Queen Mother Harmony is, and also Andrew and so many, is that there has to be reparations. They talked about reparations were due, but also that it never happened again. So you can't, pay reparations, whatever reparations look like, but then business as usual, that can't be. So that's also tied in it. But again, it's a complete document, and we'll be sharing more and more. Go ahead.
Yes. I just wanted to say, too, I just want to read paragraph 160, which is in the declaration, and this is talking about reparations and so forth. Paragraph 160 of the declaration says they urge states to take all necessary measures to address as a matter of urgency. As a matter of urgency, we are in 2023, and this document was created in 2001. So this is how urgent it is. But they urge all states, as a matter of urgency, the pressing requirement for justice for the victims of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance, and to ensure that victims have full access to information, support, effective protection, and national administrative and judicial remedies, including the right to seek justice and adequate reparation or satisfaction for damage, as well as legal assistance where required. Ashe?
Shay, let
Ashe.
me go in and then turn it over to our two guests too. But some words, because again, as I was reading it, just to get the full impact of it, I looked up a few words. So there's part that says provision of effective remedies. What do we do about this? It says provision of effective remedies, recourse, redress, and compensatory and other measures at the national, regional, and international levels. So when I first read that, I thought of national as like Washington here for us. But then as I kind of thought about it, meditated, contemplated, it's clear that national is not just the government. Well, it can't be, because we're supposed to be for the people and by the people. So we can't say those people there in Washington and those people in Washington did walk out, but we didn't walk out because we didn't even know it existed. Most of us didn't. So we're informing you because you're part of the national. We're part of the national. We're part of the national. And again, reconciliation ministry talks about, it starts with us, self to self, know thyself. And so we're the first step in making this change. We're the first step. So we have to do right by ourselves. First of all, take care of ourselves, our health, and all that. Brother Sapiwe has some information on that. We may do it another time, but take care of ourselves. So we're the first step. If all of us die off or sick or something's going on, we can't even. I had a hard time getting up the hill in Geneva because just, I need to build my stamina. So national, yourself, your family, your home, your community, these are the places that we began to build up a foundation to be able to address some of this. But real quick too, without running on and on, is the words remedies are in here: effective remedies, recourse, redress, and compensatory and other measures. So I looked up remedies, and sometimes words, but it becomes important to maybe look at some of the other meanings. Remedies are a means of counteracting or eliminating something undesirable. And then I looked up recourse. Also, the interesting thing is recourse, remedies, and redress all start with RE, which is a whole nother conversation for someone who works on that level. But the legal recourse is the legal right to demand compensation or payment. Okay. The legal right to demand, or it can be a source of help in different situations. And redress is remedy or to set something right. So we need to set this. No, the world needs to set it right. You need to set it right.
Yes.
And so, and then the compensatory is to make amends for loss or harm that was suffered. So just to think about, these are things the United Nations, the DDPA Declaration of Durban Declaration and Program of Action is saying that these things must happen. So the framework is there. And I've heard people say, well, they didn't do anything, they're not doing anything now. The framework is there. And so this is a personal, everyone's kind of talk from personal point a little bit here. And I'm saying from personal point, it starts with you. So for those watching now, start today. You don't have the Durban Declaration possibly now. You don't know, you can't go to Washington. You may not go to wherever but right where you are, start with yourself. so that you can be an advocate where you are. Start with your family. I brought some books back and gave to my grandchildren. Teach the young. Let's begin to build up advocates, because the nation, when they say the nation and the world and international, the nation needs to be made up of people that we put in there. And so we put in people who walked out, then what happened? What happened? Are they still in there? So I'm just saying, we need to know. So on that note, I will pass it on over.
I want Safiwi to talk for a minute, but it was a short point I wanted to make. If you got, I've been following the news lately, and if you guys follow what's going on right now, we recently, just last week, January 9th, had the Church of England do a public apology for their involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. They did some research of the Queen Anne's fund. It's called the Queen Anne's Bounty, and the this fund by Queen Anne supported the transatlantic slave trade. They did heavy investment in the slave traders, and so now they realize that, or well, they probably already knew, but now they're admitting that the wealth of England and the Church of England, the wealth that they have, which is something like $10 billion, was primarily funded and founded on the because of the transatlantic slave trade and them funding those practices. So they said that they're committing $120 million for reparations. So they want to invest in African and African American or people of African descent in their communities, help us get on our feet with businesses and so forth. I hope that they do honor that. But also Netherlands has just admitted their involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. Belgium. So these countries are starting to admit this. And like Prophet Cox said, here in California, we have a very, very strong foundation that we're building on as far as what reparations would look like. It's called the California Reparations Task Force. I have been on the listening sessions. I'm not on the force, but I have listened in and contributed my thoughts as a woman of African descent on what reparations would look like in the state of California. So this is a movement, a growing movement. And what I would just encourage is that we all, again, unite and come together and stand on this. Let's say, no, this was a violation of our human rights, and we do deserve restitution and reparations and so forth. So if we don't say anything, if we just be like, oh, okay, well, that people been talking about reparations for years and we're not getting reparations. If you take that lackadaisical attitude, why would they give us reparations? Why? So we have to stand up. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
And I agree. I'm turning it over to some people. I agree. I would only, and of course, June is our time to talk and debate, but so I'm treading lightly in this area. But I'm a little concerned about if I owe you money, then I look at my bank account and see what I can give you. There's something a little problematic, because if you got 50 billion in Church of England and England itself, I know they got somewhere in somebody's pocket, they got trillions. So I tell you what I got in my pocket, but I'll leave that for June. I may not even be a speaker in June, but I just leave that for June. I'll turn it over to Brother Sifiwe.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about this, but I won't address it now. I'll wait till June.
Yes, Emmanuel.
What I'd like to do is kind of give a systematic overview of the Durban Declaration, its structure, so that we can have a basic understanding of the logic and what's in it. But before I do that, I want to make one remark, which is human rights are not something that are bestowed upon us or given to us.
Yes.
Human rights is what we are born with. And it comes from what we call natural law. Every single one of us is born with the full set of quote unquote, human rights bestowed upon us by our Creator naturally. And without any kind of training whatsoever, we exercise them. We move freely according to our capacity. We speak freely according to our ability to articulate. Everything that is in human rights law, modern law today, we had as ancient Africans from the very beginning, and every individual is born with them. Racism and slavery, one of the tragedies of it, and the reason why we have, I believe today is called National Day of Healing or Racial Healing. Let me
Racial
get,
healing.
what is the National Day of Racial Healing. What that is an acknowledgement of is that we have been living under a system that has miseducated us to not be aware of our own natural behavior, which is human rights.
Right.
Right? We have been through a dehumanizing process called enslavement, right? That has taught us that we weren't human, so therefore we couldn't speak freely, we couldn't move freely, we couldn't associate freely with whoever we want. That is unnatural. The only reason why we need a Declaration of Human Rights and a Durban document in the first place is to undo this unnatural, evil system and indoctrination that has caused us to be confused about what we are entitled to do on planet Earth. Okay?
Preach.
So human rights is not something that some international organization bestows upon us or gives us. All they have done is articulate. And I'm not going to get into the history of the United Nations or Eleanor Roosevelt. I'm going to save all that stuff for June. What I will do now is just, first of all, again, the document that we are talking about, this Durban Declaration and the Program of Action, was produced at the World Conference Against Racism that included 18,810 delegates from 170 countries, 16 heads of state, 58 foreign ministers, 44 ministers, 7,000 non-governmental representatives, 1,300 journalists. And at the end of this, the Durban Declaration was the consensus document representing the final statement or judgment of humanity. Okay? The document itself, if you go online, there's a PDF version of the document that is 62 pages. The document is basically has two parts. There's the declaration, which basically states what it is that we now know and understand about racism, xenophobia, slavery, what we understand about all of this, what we want all human beings to understand about it. And it's done in a preamble and then 122 points. So that's the first part of the document. It basically lays out in all areas, right, what the problem of racism is and who it is affecting and why it is a violation of these natural human rights. The second part of the document is what is called the Program of Action. This is what we're going to do about it. And as has already been mentioned, it's targeted to United Nations member states who have the responsibility at all levels, local, state, regional, and international levels, for creating policy, legislations, programs, educational programs that support this program of action. And that part of the document is, I believe, 212 points. So you have 122 points in the first section and 212 in this section. So it's 62 pages. So I'm so happy that Queen Mother Nina Womack has said, look, we understand not everybody reads now. By having an audiobook version where somebody is reading it and you can just hear and listen to it, is a noble and commendable work. And so we want to thank you and everyone that was involved for putting that together and making that happen. Now, the first part of the document is broken down into the sort of the following sections. It starts with a kind of preamble on pages that's 4 pages long. And then the next 2 pages cover what are called general issues. Then after that, there's a section entitled Sources, Causes, Forms, and Contemporary Manifestations of Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerance. Okay? The sources, causes, and forms, so that we can know in great detail and with clarity what it is exactly we are talking about. Because one, in order to solve this problem, we got to go to the root of the problem, the source of the problem. And so this section addresses that, right? And what caused this? Okay? And then what are the various forms? Because, and I think Prophet Anyanwu had highlighted this, there are so many different forms of racism, slavery, and discrimination that affect people and even categories of people that we don't necessarily think about. As African people, of course, we're always conscious of the racism that we suffer and survive and overcome that is directed to us because we are African people and because the color of our skin is black, right? But there are other forms that are targeted to other populations that are not necessarily African. And then even as human beings, discrimination based on quote unquote physical handicaps or mental handicaps. So that section is wanting to detail comprehensively but with clarity. Again, the sources, causes, forms, contemporary manifestations, because what we see today, for example, prison industrial complex of the United States is no different than the slave patrols during, the slavery period in Reconstruction. So in substance, it's the same thing, but it takes on a different form that is more palatable, that kind of disguises it. So you have to expose as they, in their language, contemporary manifestations. Okay. So that's done on pages 6, 7, 8, and 9 of this document. The next section says, now that we understand the sources, causes, and forms and contemporary manifestations of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance, now we need to identify who are the victims. So the next section is entitled Victims of Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerance. And those run from pages 9 through 14. So they take 5 pages to talk about who are the victims of this social disease called racism. The next section says, now that we know the sources, causes, forms, contemporary manifestations, and victims, now they want to discuss, the next section is called Measures of Prevention, Education and Protection, aimed at the eradication of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance at the national, regional, and international levels. Okay, so now it starts a discussion of what needs to be done to prevent this from continuing at those 3 levels. And that goes from pages 14 through 17. the next section is provisions of effective remedies, recourse, redress, and compensatory and other measures, again, at the national, regional, and international levels. So the prior section talks about what must be done at those levels, and the next section talks about details and components to make that happen. And then finally, the last section in part 1 of the Durban Declaration are strategies to achieve full and effective equality, including international cooperation and enhancement of the United Nations and other international mechanisms in combating racism. Okay, and that goes from page 18 to 22. So the first 22 pages are structured in this way, right? What is the source, origin, causes, and contemporary forms? Who are the victims? What do we need to do to prevent it? What are the components of those actions? And then what are the strategies we need to take so that we can implement them? So let me stop there and see if there's some comments or discussion.
We do have some comments in the chat. We have Emmanuel from he has a comment here. One second. And also Danso from Ghana. So Emmanuel says, the whole of Africa is with you commemorating this day. Africa has suffered a lot from human rights abuse. Ashe, Ashe, absolutely. And it's time for restitution. Also, Danso Saki from Ghana just said, he said, some Ghanaians feel the need to review or add-ons to their constitution established in 1992. Are there any form of constitutional laws that Ghanaians in the diaspora require that be added?
Let me address that. I am a professor of international law and the development of international law with a focus on African Union member states and African peoples. Here in Guinea-Bissau, for example, in the Constitution of Guinea-Bissau, it references the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as well as the Constitution of the African Union. And it states that all domestic law in Guinea-Bissau must be interpreted within the framework of international law and international instruments. I don't know the specifics of the Constitution of Ghana, but you should do a review of it and see if there is something like that within the Constitution. And if not, it's civil society's responsibility to use the legislative process to amend the Constitution so that it does recognize the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Durban Declaration, because Ghana, like all the other nations, have an obligation to implement what are in these instruments. So that's a great question. All nations should reference this in their constitutions. And in the United States, for example, in the Constitution, it talks about the supremacy of international treaties. They obviously don't mention the United Nations or Durban Declaration or AU or anything like that, but constitutions are living, breathing documents that are written by people to serve people. And so as we develop in our struggle to defend our natural human rights, constitutions that are lacking in language and provisions can be amended.
Brother Sapiwe, can you define for us, there's so many terms, I find that's tied in with this United Nations and international work. What is a civil society? A simple term, but help us, get a clear view of what it is.
Simply put, a common sense on the civil society is all the different groups that are not official members of the government. Okay? If you don't have a government title and a position, but you are a group doing something. Civil society represents, for example, religious organizations, churches, business and trade organizations, sports organizations, health and healing, practitioners. Civil society encompasses all areas of human activity. And wherever you have groups doing something, whether they're legally registered with the national government or not, if you're just meeting, in your basement with 6 of your friends, but you are working on doing a bake sale to raise money for sickle cell anemia, you're part of civil society. And so the United Nations has a platform or a mechanism for civil society to contribute to international political, all areas of human activity. And then each nation has space for civil society to contribute to developing your nation. And one way of doing that is for civil society to use politics and legislation to make sure the government has policies to do what you, as the people, want it to do. I don't know if I answered your question, Prophet Anyanwu.
Yes. No, that was
Try to.
excellent. I guess so, to sum it up, from my basement or my room, in the back room of somebody's garage, I can be I can have a civil society, and I can make a difference at the United Nations and at the national level. So no one has an excuse for not jumping into this work. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I just want to acknowledge a few of our audience members tuning in. Emmanuel from Malawi, we see you. Thank you so much for your comments. We've got Crown Prince Jamel L. Jamel is a diaspora king. He has brought together a group, and they have founded their own kingdom, the Numi Kingdom. And so they are recognized by the country of Liberia and several other countries. And I think he's working on the United Nations of being an independent, sovereign government from the diaspora out here. He's based in Atlanta. Thank you so much for tuning in. And Danso Saki from Ghana, thank you guys for tuning in. We are about to wind down with our program. We have a wonderful, powerful documentary coming up called the Durban 400, and this is a documentary about the actual Durban Declaration, that world conference that we are speaking of in 2001, and how a group of African Americans, of Pan Africanists, people of African descent, went over there to Durban to address what was going on in this conference. And before we get on to that documentary, I want to ask you guys to please, if you can follow me or sign in, if there's a way where you could get notified about my upcoming lives. We will have Safiwi back. I have talked to him. He is such a wealth of knowledge, and he knows everything about epigenetics, and I want to have an extensive conversation with him about that. If you guys don't know, Safiwi, can you just I was about to explain it, but you're the expert. So please just briefly talk about epigenetics and how it relates to us as well.
So epigenetics refers to the process of how our bodies are in constant communication with the environment at various levels, even at subconscious or unconscious levels, and how information from the environment is stored in our DNA and passed on to our offspring and their offspring, so that every generation doesn't have to start from scratch learning the lessons that the previous generation learned. So it's like the this massive library that we carry in our DNA. Epigenetics is the science of how that happens. And what we have learned is that traumatic experiences, life threatening experiences, make the greatest input epigenetically and is stored in our bodies that changes how our brain structure develops, how it operates, and how our unconscious systems function. So, as a result, epigenetics is really important when it comes to our experience as, and I say African people who were enslaved, not African slaves, because we don't ever want to associate that African people are a thing called a slave. No, we are not. There's no such thing as African slaves. There are African people who have served, who have suffered slavery. Epigenetics and the enslaving or dehumanizing has encoded in our bodies trauma and certain responses that are unnatural, that is part of the harm that we need to heal. We can talk about the emotional healing. For some people, we can talk about the physical healing. The fact that high blood pressure and hypertension is related to the fact that for the first 6 weeks on a slave ship, we were fed food, right, that was cured with fat and salt. And so in that transition, our bodies had to adapt to a high fat, high salt diet, which laid the groundwork, right, for our high blood pressure and hypertension of today. So we have emotional healing, we have physical healing, we have spiritual healing, we have mental healing, but we also have some genetic healing that needs to take place.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so we are going to have him back on. You guys subscribe to my live so you can get notified, and we are going to go in depth with that. If you guys have not done the research, this is real. Also, the Holocaust survivors, they found out that that epigenetics is definitely documented and well researched. There has not been a lot of work done with this generational trauma for people of African descent, but we're the same human beings, just like people of Jewish, So we do
Queen
have.
Mother, Queen
Mhm.
Mother Womack can
Go on. Sure, go on.
just to interrupt. Baba Wade Noble's spirit and voice just entered into me and is reminding me. He talked to me extensively about this, that when I talk about this, to not just focus on the harms of the epigenetic harms of slavery, but also the healing aspect of it, which means that what we do today, the
Yes,
good
yes.
things that we do today for our bodies, our souls, our minds, and spirit will be passed on through our children, our grandchildren, our great grandchildren. So epigenetics is not all doom and gloom. It inspires and motivates us that we can take responsibility for creating 200-300 years from now the society we want, and the offspring that we want, by eating right, meditating, exercising, doing the internal healing that is our responsibility. So I want to honor Baba Wade Nobles for reminding me to be more positive.
Yes, yes.
Ashe, Ashe, Ashe.
Emmanuel
Also,
from
let me throw
One second. Emmanuel from Malawi said we need all these healings though. Yep.
yes,
He's ready for
absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
He's ready for
So
it.
along with that, with the epigenetics as well, is that, and there's a quote that says, if trauma can be passed down through generations, so can healing. That goes along with what you were saying, and that we have a even in terms of our healing, we have a lot going back to self. We have a lot of control even now. Our ancestors have been through the horrors of enslavement and all that, and today we still have a lot of control over how we stay healthy. Even if our ancestors, my mother, father, whoever had diabetes, high blood pressure, it doesn't have to pass down. You can change. They have found, so they have some research around this, not just for people of African descent, but we can change in one generation. We can change in our generation. We can change in our generation. I'm 73. I'm not on any pharmaceuticals. I don't have high blood pressure. My mother had diabetes. My father had high blood pressure so bad he had to come up with his own remedy because the doctors couldn't figure out what to do. But he came up with a remedy, and he never had to go on blood pressure medicine. And so I've been able to be free of those. My mother, I watched her go from smoking cigarettes to drinking a certain dark brown drink with fizz in it. I don't want to call any company names, but they're in competition, and this one starts with a C. But anyway, but she wound up, and they have linked over time. They've linked some of those things to certain conditions, side effects of certain medicines, as high blood pressure, diabetes. So we have some control. The other big thing that even if we say, well, I don't have the money for this or that, there's some free things like our language, our speaking, our thinking. They have found that there's something, and now by the time we have Brother Sapiwe back, I will have fine-tuned where I found this, is that they're like a little antenna on the membrane of the cell, and it picks up messages. And so it will begin to start the DNA changing and shifting based on what it picks up. It gets its messages not directly from what people are doing to us, but how we process it. So what Brother Sapiwe said about meditation and prayer and all that, reframing, they can't control that. They try to do it with fear and misinformation. And so because we have that and we get so fearful, then that affects but we have the ability to take a moment and begin to decide what we want life to look like for us, and then feed our cells, it's the membranes of our cells ourselves. Don't let everything come off the TV and the media, and it's feeding those cells and telling them how to develop. We actually have the power to do that, and that part of it is free. Just wanted to throw that in. Look forward to that conversation, Brother Sapiwe.
Yes, that is going to be a great conversation. A great conversation. So, I just want us to, say a few closing remarks before we go into the Durban 400 documentary. You guys don't want to miss this documentary. It's only about 40 minutes long. It'll go by fast, but it is very powerful, very powerful. Again, this is the National Day of Racial Healing, the 7th year. And I'm so happy to be here with my guest and my co-partner, Prophet Cox. Michelle, Safiwi, we love you. Thank you so much for all that you know, for all that you've given, for continuing this fight to defend our human rights. So, in closing, Michelle, do you want to say anything on this day?
I just want to name my ancestor who was born on a slave ship. Her mother died giving birth to her, and she was dropped off on the island of Barbados. And when she was old enough to work at the age of 7, they took her to Virginia, and her name is Celia. That's the name that they gave her. And so I just want to call her name as my ancestor, who is, I believe, is guiding me in this work.
Yes, Ashe.
On that note, can I call my father, Percy Perryman, who started me at age 12? He believed that there was some greater knowledge to be had than they were delivering to the masses, and he started in search of it when he was 8 years old and began to give it to us when we were 12. One of the books he gave me at 12, I just finished reading at age 72 last week. So don't wait long to tap into the gifts of your ancestors. But that's Percy Perryman and my mother, Bessie Perryman, and his mother, Deborah Cunningham, who was 107 when she passed, and her dad, who was part African, part indigenous or Native American, and was a healer in the community. And even people of Caucasian or European descent would sneak around at night to get his remedies, even though they wouldn't allow any of our folks in their hospitals. So I call their names. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Ashe. Well, I just want to say, okay, yes, go on, Sophie.
Yeah, I just want to follow in that tradition. I'd like to call the name of my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, Brasa Inchabra, who was taken as an 8-year-old boy from his village in Nakra, the village of Unche in modern day Guinea-Bissau, and was trafficked to Charleston, South Carolina, where he was sold into slavery and brought to North Carolina. And he is the patriarch of the paternal side of my family, whose spirit I have been able to repatriate and set free in his ancestral home.
Ashe, Ashe. And I would like to give acknowledgement to my ancestor, actor, musician Jester Hairston, who was our family griot and kept the legacy and the knowledge of where we come from, the Hairstons. That's my maiden name. I was married to singer Bobby Womack's nephew, so that is now my public name, but my birth name is Nina Hairston. And the Hairstons, Hairston, were the largest slaveholding family. Peter Hairston came from Scotland with his brothers and was the largest slaveholding family in the United States, owning over 30,000 slaves and over about 40 different plantations. And so I am a product of the transatlantic slave trade with both African and European, Scottish specifically, roots. And so it has been very healing for me as a woman, a product of the slave trade, to now have come into education about my African roots, because all I knew growing up was that I came from slavery. But when I was educated about the truth about Africa and its beauty and development and how advanced the people were, it really just opened up my eyes and put me on this path where I am now, which is an advocate for human rights and for justice for people of African descent. I want to encourage everyone to learn about your African roots, reconnect. If you see, I've got this crown and I've got this kente cloth because I have reconnected with African roots. I went to Ghana last year. They installed me as a development queen of a community. As far as I'm concerned, I'm a queen of Africa, a symbolic queen of Africa, because I really love Africa and I want to see it develop and get what it deserves. Thank you, Ashe.
Ashe. My best friend in nursing school is Hairston. We're still, I have to tell her about
Yeah,
that.
that's my
Yeah.
tribe. That's my family member. Oh, wow. Very interesting. Very interesting. All right. Any last comments before we go into this documentary?
Just one short, quick comment.
I want to thank you, P-Way, for the documentary, and then I'll shut up. I'm muting. Go ahead.
Just one quick comment, which is, since today is the National Day of Racial Healing, one way to understand the Durban Declaration is that this is the foundation for what needs to be done for racial healing. This document is agreed upon by the whole world, is the foundation for what needs to be done in a very broad sense. Ashe.
Ashe. Ashe.
And with that, just real quickly, just dovetailing on what he said, he mentioned the victims as he was reading the different categories. So for anyone watching this and noticing that we're all people of African ancestry, and to know that we are here today, it may seem as though we're only focusing on one side, but the victims that are listed in the Durban Declaration include people of African ancestry, and the Asian, Palestinian, Israeli, refugees, migrants, people with HIV, women and girls. So this document really lays out, when it talks about for all people without exclusion, it is the human race. And so we have, as we supply you with the education about it, charge you to do whatever. We won't tell you how to view it or what to think about it, but charge you with the knowledge to get involved at your level and get your legislators involved, because we are the nation wherever you are on the planet. Ashe.
Ashe. Ashe.
Greetings, Ambassador.
Yes, and before we go into this documentary, we would like to have a few closing words and a closing prayer from one of my favorite reverends in the world, Reverend Kwame Kamau. I love him so much. He is a reparations minister, so he will tell you briefly about what that is. He's in the Caribbean and from the Caribbean, and so we welcome you into our broadcast, Ashe, on the National Day of Racial Healing.
Well, thank you so very much, Queen Mother. Clearly, I am doubly blessed, triply blessed, perhaps quadruply blessed to be in such a very august panel, the likes of this. I know that the work towards racial healing and repair as part of the greater discussion of reparations is an ongoing one. And there is not going to be any one conference, any one panel, any one congress, any one forum that is going to do it. And so I'm thankful to you and to the other very noteworthy panelists, because I know that for you, this is your lifeblood. This is something that you do on an ongoing basis. It's what you live for. It's what wakes you up in the morning. And it really gives me great excitement to join you here. You gave me two fantastic responsibilities. Responsibility numero uno would be to talk about what African Reparations Ministry is really all about. And then secondarily, to engage a prayer. And of course, you know, I love prayer. It's the cornerstone of my ministry. But African Reparations Ministries really has to do with an intersectional, multi-discipline, multi-dimensional approach to the trauma, to the pain, to the suffering, to the disrepair that has been meted out not only to African persons as we know them historically in terms of the so-called Negroid, but all of humanity having an African origin. All of humanity can be considered to be African. And so whether you are the victim, in this case, the Negroid race, or whether you are the villain, those who would have perpetrated crimes of humanity against the Negroid race, whether it is by way of chattel slavery, colonialism, neocolonialism, or any other form of trauma, any form of hurt, any form of disrepair, even the villain or the villains, plural, collective, are in need of healing, are in need of repair, are in need of a solution to take them out of that villainy mindset, that white supremacist mindset, that anti-African mindset, that anti-black mindset, and bring them back into the Ubuntu mindset. I am because you are. You are because I am. So that we can live as one big, beautiful human species, which happens to have a wonderful, awesome African origin. So I make the point because I'm a homeschooler and I'm an educator par excellence. And so one of the things that I tell my children all the time, I say to them, if you're a human being, you're African. If you don't want to claim your Africanness, then you are claiming that you're a Martian, or maybe you're from Pluto, maybe you're from Saturn, Jupiter. They discovered a planet only recently in a part of the universe where life may dwell there. Maybe you're from that planet. But for as long as you're an earthling, you are African. And so African Reparations Ministries takes into consideration environmentalism, because not only did we hurt human beings, but we've been destroying the planet. And so we need to repair the planet. It takes into consideration economics and entrepreneurship, because I can't just pray for your troubles and issues with regards to job creation, with regards to providing economic opportunities. We need to have real and tangible solutions for the people of the world to come out of our economic crises. in addition to environmentalism and economics, we must focus on education. Part of the problem of the world is miseducation. And to heal that, we must get education right. And this very platform today is part of the informal education, part of the training, part of the reprogramming that is necessary. And so it's so invaluable, it's so important. So we talked about the ease of environmentalism and economics and education, but we cannot leave out community engagement. We can't leave out of the picture the whole business of what we refer to as empowerment of communities by way of returning to them their agency, returning to them that which they need most in terms of those practical solutions, again, to bring about healing. And then last but not least, we are esoteric because we are not just physical, we are not just emotional, we are spirit that happens to maneuver and engage the world through a soul, and we live in a body. And so it must be body, mind, soul, and spirit. And so the esoteric element is designed to ensure that we are not so secular and earthly minded that we are no spiritual good. But we've seen so many persons also invert that. What do I mean? They are so spiritually minded that they are no earthly good. And so we need to have that balance according to Ubuntu. And that's what African Reparations Ministries is all about. And so once you give me the nod, I'll be more than happy and more than willing to engage that prayer that you've been asking for. But that's in a synopsis, the work of African Reparations Ministries. It is multi-tiered, it is multidisciplinary, necessarily because the trauma inflicted upon us is multidimensional. The cure, the solution must also of necessity be multidimensional as well.
Ashe, 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 Ashe.
Mhm.
Yes, yes, yes. Emmanuel from Malawi said, wonderful, Rev. Wonderful. But yes, again, follow me on Facebook. Sign up for my live. We are also going to have Reverend Kwame Kamal on, and he's going to get in more depth about what African reparations looks like. And from my understanding, from talking to him, it's not just getting compensation from a country, or it's work within ourselves too. So that's, he has a whole full plan for what reparations looks like, and we're going to get into that this year. So I'm so excited. So okay, please
And
close
Queen
us out.
Mother, they can also
Go
they
on.
can also find the if not today, tomorrow, the group to join, so we
Yes.
can do a deep dive into the more into the and they can also hopefully find the audio book there too. So, but they just go to your web page and they'll find all the goodies that we have. We even have some incentives, some nice things that we might be able to send out to you. All
Yes,
right, go
absolutely.
ahead.
Absolutely. You, if those of you, you can contact me on WhatsApp, Facebook, go into our event live. It's going to be posted there. Yes, please follow us on social media, and we will make sure that you get these materials, the PDF of the declaration, the audio book, and we look forward. Oh, I'm so happy today. I love each and every one of you. I'm happy. This is a beautiful racial healing day, and I'm so excited to have this team together. Very powerful team. Very powerful.
And I'm jumping in here again because there's something about Queen Mother Nina Womack. When I talk to her, this happened with some other people on here too. She'll say something, all of a sudden I get an idea and I take off running, right? So like a cat chasing a fire truck or something. But the idea that this team that we have here today, which is amazingly a powerful team, many of us, at least from my side, came together some months ago. So when you're listening to things like the Durban Declaration or the Sustainable Goals or something in your community, you have a team. You have a sphere of influence that you don't know. And then sometimes I'm finding my sphere of influence, I haven't met them yet. They're all over the world. Guinea-Bissau, Caribbean. I mean, they're so just engaging. You'll be surprised, one, who you are within yourself, and that greatness within you attracts other greatness. So just know you have it. You may not know it at the moment, but when you get off here, take a minute, be still, and get in touch with that. But you have a group as well, so you can start some of these conversations as you learn more, and then engage with us, and we can support you in it. But we are the power. It's not sitting in a particular place somewhere. We are the ones, and we're the ones that put them there. So anything that's not happening at the national, international level is because at our level we haven't activated. But there are enough of us across the world to do so. Okay, we have a wonderful documentary, so I will mute with that. Thank you so much.
All right, Reverend, close us out in prayer, and then we're going to get into the documentary.
Oh, thank you so very much. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And that Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And the Word said, let us make mankind, in our image and in our likeness. What a powerful utterance indeed that was and is. Because we know that mankind is male and female. It means necessarily, if we are the image bearers of the Most High, the Elohim, it means necessarily that the Elohim is also masculine and feminine. And so we are thankful today that we have the overstanding, that we have the understanding, that we have the understanding that we are not an accident, that this is not the product of a big bang, that this is not from goo to the zoo to becoming you. Everyone in this room was purposed. Everyone on this planet was made in the image of the Most High, whether male or female, whether Ish or Isha, whether Zakah or Nekiva, whether Melech king or Malka queen. We are all image bearers of the Most High. But in the fullness of time, we fell as a humanity, and we came out of the glorious earthly, spiritual, heavenly beginnings that we were in. We fell from the ideal that is Ubuntu, and in our fall we fragmented. We fragmented not only in terms of men against women, and adults against children, and the young against the old, but we fragmented in terms of tribe against tribe, nation against nation, people against people, race against race. But that was not from the beginning. That was not your design. That was not your plan. That was not your template. And insofar as racial disharmony, disunity, disequilibrium is not the plan of the Most High, it means that such behavior, such thoughts, such words, such activities are only trespassing. And we know in the spirit realm how to deal with trespassers. And so now we take our governmental authority based on the power that is given to us from on high, from within Shamayim, within the third heaven, yea, within the fourth heaven, yea, the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh heaven. And we take that power now, and we declare, even as the word began with a declaration, that healing is ours, that love is ours, that rebuilding and restoration is ours, that working together towards the collective good of the planet is ours, that it's not too late to turn back the hands of time in terms of climate change and the disasters that are taking place. We claim victory in terms of reconciliation. We claim victory in terms of healing. We are six-dimensional beings: physical, emotional, social, intellectual, vocational, and spiritual. And in every one of those facets, we claim healing now in the name of love, in the name of Ubuntu. And we are grateful and we are thankful that we don't have to be born in Africa to be Africans. We are grateful and we are thankful for as long as Africa is born in you, you can and you will be and you are African. And so we say to the Africans in America, come home. We say to the Africans in South Africa, come home. We say to the Africans in Asia, come home. We say to the Africans in Europe, come home. We say to the Africans in Oceania, come home. We say to the Africans, certainly in every 4th and 5th and 6th and 7th quadrant of the world, please come home. Come home not just to a territory, not just to a geography, but come home to the understanding, the overstanding, and the understanding that yes, I am my brother's keeper. When the first blood was shed on the earth, there was a statement made when Cain tried to escape, as it were, the judgment for his crime. When asked, where is my brother? His response was, am I my brother's keeper? It was a rhetorical question. It was most disrespectful. It was designed to be sarcastic, but we are taking that word and we are turning it and inverting it on its head, and we are saying, yes, we are our brother's keeper. And whether that brother is white or black or brown or otherwise, you are my brother and I am your brother. And Ubuntu informs us, I am because you are. Ubuntu also informs that I am because the creation is. And if I treat the creation well, then I treat myself well. But Ubuntu also reminds us that I am because you are. I am because I am a product of the divine. I am an image bearer of the Benayo Elohim, the sons of the Most High. And there even the Ba'at Zion, the daughters of Zion as well. And as the sons and daughters, we have a sacred role, yea, even a most important responsibility to heal and to recover this earth, this dimension, back into the Al-Kibulan, back into the Eden, back into the Afruika, the birthing of humanity that it once was. And we cannot do that only utilizing secular power and authority. We recognize, as I close, that the spiritual dimension is equally necessary, perhaps even more so, but all things must be done in decency and in order with divine balance. Continue to strengthen the arms of these mighty queens, the mighty prophets in the room, the mighty men and women of the Most High in the room, who've made it their life's work to bring about change and healing and reparations. And as we go into the documentary and as we go into other exercises, it is our prayer on this evening that that which we cannot pray because of a lack of time, or that which our lips are too short to speak because we know it not, that which we have not declared unto you in supplication, fail not in your mercies, O merciful divine Father and divine Mother, to grant unto us all these and more besides. We ask in your precious name. We ask in your worthy name. We ask in your most adorable name. So let it be written. So let it be done in your realm, even as it is in our realm, the Aretz. So be it. So be it. So be it. Asheo. Asheo.
Asheo. Asheo. All right, you guys. So that concludes our live. We are going to go into the documentary. Please watch. It's very informative. Let's congratulate our guests and our host, Prophet Cox, again for your participation. And you guys are free to get off the camera while we play this video.
How do we get off the camera? Because I couldn't figure out how to turn my camera off, so I had to do a bio thing. I couldn't figure out how to do it.
Okay.
But before you go, I just thank you. We have 22 years ago you were in Durban, and you sit here now. So
Yes.
so your
Yeah.
history sitting amongst us, and we thank you for coming. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I had the same problem, except I figured out how to throw something over there. Something.
I couldn't figure out how to do it. I was like, okay, what? Somebody. I'll just turn my screen.
I I know. We have to be mindful of elders on here. We have well, not all generations, because I don't have my grandkids and some on here. We have several generations, but I get it. I get it. I get it.
Well, the video is going to be playing, so you could just shut down your
Okay.
computer. I think that'll disconnect you. Yes,
Okay.
yes. All right. Thank you so much, Reverend Kamal. Oh my gosh, you
Thank
are a
you.
blessing. I
Yes.
look forward to so many more conversations and the work that we're doing together. And thank you, Brother Safiwi. Amazing, amazing. Such a wealth of knowledge. And I can't wait for you to come back so we can get into the epigenetics and all the other knowledge that you have in that brain of yours. Oh my God. And Madam Michelle Elder, you are brilliant. You are amazing. We thank you. I can't wait for you to come back too. You got to come back on this Facebook Live and do some more in-depth talk. And
And she does storytelling, all kind of stuff. Let's
we
all commit here today that we're going to do something together again. I was impressed myself. Thank you so much, everybody.
and my co-host Prophet Cox, she is the reconciliation minister. She's right on the same vibe as me. If you guys know me, know who Queen Mother Nina is. I am a holistic advocate, practitioner, everything. Let's look at the wellness of people, mind, body, and soul, especially people of African descent. So Prophet Cox is doing some great work in that area with emotional healing circles for people of African descent to get back, get into the meat of what is holding us back and how to release it. She's doing some wonderful work, and we are going to have some sessions with her too to get into this healing work. So again, this is a dream
And
come
we're
true.
talking, but Elder Michelle, we don't want to hold you up, so you don't have to wait for our last comment because I already went.
All right, so we're gonna get into this documentary, and you guys can click off if you know how to click off. And thank you so much, Facebook, for listening. We're gonna share this for those that did not catch it, and we appreciate you attending on the 7th annual National Day of Racial Healing. And thank you, Kellogg Foundation, for creating an annual event like this. Thank you.
Hang in for the video. You're don't want to miss it. It is history. Blessings, everyone.
Blessings.
Bid 'em in, get 'em in. That sun is hot and plenty bright. Let's get on to business and get home tonight. Bid 'em in. Auctioning slaves is a real high art. Bring that young gal, Roy. She's good for a start. Bid 'em in, get 'em in. Now here's a real good buy on about 15. A great grandmother.
In the fall of 2001, the Durban 400, a coalition of grassroots activists from the African diaspora, was formed to take the issue of reparations for the transatlantic slave trade to Durban, South Africa for the UN World Conference Against Racism, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerances. They demand for a final declaration that addresses the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism as crimes against humanity and that reparations are due African descendants was viewed by the United States government and their allies as inflammatory.
Be clear that our goal as Africans is to go to Durban to fight for the issue of the transatlantic slave trade as a crime against humanity, colonialism, a crime against humanity.
The Western press is reporting that the World Conference Against Racism won't be successful if the United States and its European allies do not participate. We take the opposite position. We say that we have forced the Western world up against the wall on the question of the transatlantic slave trade being a crime against humanity, the economic roots of racism being examined, and that reparations are owed African people throughout the world.
We're not talking about individuals when we talk about reparations. We're not talking about whether or not you're guilty or you're not guilty as an individual or you have some guilt complex. We're talking about the culpability of governments and states.
So now they will have to come to Durban and put the issue on the table for the world to see.
Durban 400 is a Pan-African coalition of brothers and sisters from the diaspora who came to Durban to make a statement, and a very simple one, that there was a crime committed against African people, that crime was rooted in economics, and that crime must be compensated. The Durban 400 represent the expression of our people all around the world that we must bring to closure the question of what happened to us. We must bring the truth to fore, that it was a crime, that it's not so much we're looking for an apology, we're looking for a rectification of the crime. And so there we came here to press our case to the world that African people are not going to be denied the reality of our history and the compensation for the crime committed against us.
I had no idea how important it is for people who are not involved in the government to come and state their case, and how much of an impact that can have on the government. And that a few people can make a huge difference when it comes to international policies.
Delegates from 168 countries came to vote on various resolutions, some which ultimately would be included in the final UN declaration. These countries were assigned to regional groups: Western European and other, WEO, Asian and Pacific Island Group, Central European Group, African Group, and GRUEC, the group of Latin American and Caribbean countries. However, non-governmental organizations could not vote, but they were encouraged to hold a forum before and during the conference, and activists from around the world came to discuss their issues and develop an NGO position paper which would be presented to the World Conference. Long lines complicated the registration process, and conference passes were not always available, but the Durban 400 came too far to be discouraged, so they devised a plan to get around the confusion.
We'll break down into groups in a second and then talk about how we deal with the passes and how we rotate people in and out. We have enough passes so that everybody should be able to get in there today. An hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, it depends upon when we get a final count of the passes. But everybody should be able to get in there today so that everybody can get a taste of what's going on in there. It's nothing magic. It's no different than what we do over here, except there's a higher concentration of delegates.
There was no such thing as a crime.
Prior to meeting with delegates from countries opposed to reparations, the Durban 400 held strategy workshops to clarify key points of contention.
I don't know if I know the answer. Will you answer it, Ilga? What is the, there was no crime called crime against humanity and slavery occurred. What's the answer?
And your retort to that would be, oh, absolutely, I know that is what happened and that's how that terminology came about. But just because there was no terminology available does not mean it did not occur.
What's the precedent for reparations? The one is the Japanese received reparations.
After internment in the World War II.
The who?
After internment, after being in concentration camp in World War II. The precedent that they all know about is the precedent of the people who were in concentration camps in Europe. And who worked as what they call slave labor in Europe. And that slave labor period lasted much shorter than the slave labor period of our ancestors in the United States.
Yes.
It cannot be jacked down.
Okay, well, the Jews, when they experienced the Holocaust, they got money from Germany. They got money from the countries in which enslaved them. The United States did not pay the Jews. Why do you want us to pay? We did not enslave you. All we did was allow for this to happen.
The
United States government was
Why do you want us to pay now? That was hundreds of years ago.
because you have benefited.
I didn't benefit.
You are continuing to benefit.
Inherited wealth. Lloyds of London benefited. Get your money from England.
And the economy of the United States was built on the slave trade.
People who do not go to the ICC need to be lobbying on the outside of the ICC, okay? So the whole purpose of a pass is to get into the ICC. At 11:30, come back here, you'll get a pass and you'll go into the ICC, and at 1 o'clock, we'll come back here and summarize. Is that clear?
The largest governmental body of delegates at the conference was the Africa Group. They represented 48 countries, and as the conference got underway, the Durban 400 continued to develop their alliance with that group.
Initiative that you have taken in asking to come and meet with the African group should have come from us, and we should have done. And in that sense, I want to really extend to all of you a very warm thank and appreciation for actually reaching out to us, and this actually is also a beginning of a continuous road that we will walk together hand in hand.
We just wanted to reemphasize it, that when we go back, we will be meeting with the Congressional Black Caucus. They've already invited us. They have a meeting every September, Black Caucus weekend, where they discuss issues. They're going to do a summation of the World Conference. They've invited us to deal with that. We are going to talk about the firm stance that Africa has taken and whatever comes out of the final document. But we're also going to discuss with them the Zimbabwe Democracy Act, which I'm sure all of you are aware of, because it's an act that does not simply affect Zimbabwe, but also affects all Southern Africa, SADC in particular, but Africa in general. Because it's an act that says that the United States can determine where democracy exists, apply sanctions until they've decided that democracy has been reestablished, and will provide money to the opposition and prevent support from international monetary organizations to countries that they've decided are on their hit list.
Thank you very much for the support and the activities and the work you've done on behalf of my government in our quest to get land given land to the people.
People should pay particular attention to Minister Shinamasa's speech. He's the Minister of Justice from Zimbabwe. We believe it was a powerful speech on one question. This attack on Zimbabwe, we believe, is a red herring.
The struggle against landlessness in Zimbabwe and in South Africa is part and parcel of the issue of reparations and colonialism. The Durban 400, the largest NGO at the conference, made this a central issue and held demonstrations and press conferences to make their position clear. However, there were those at the conference who wanted to shift the focus away from reparations.
Despite their tactics to split off African people against African people in their classic maneuvering of the process, the African people, the African group, are holding strong on our position.
What about the Caribbean?
We have support of some of the Caribbean countries. We have support of Cuba, Vietnam, North Korea, and many other countries.
I have a question for you. If the Jewish people supported the civil rights movement in the United States stronger than any other community, why attack the Jewish community today?
I think that the question that you raised shows misinformation. Because you support one thing does not mean you're opposed to another. We say that what happened to the Jewish people was a crime against humanity. And the Jewish people have been vindicated. But you can never have total vindication if 6 million of your people are put in ovens by the Germans. We take the same position. We should never forget. As a matter of fact, we have learned much from the Jewish people and their strategy to prepare and to seek damages for what had happened to them. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So it is not because we support the people in Palestine to get their land back that we are opposed to Jewish people. That is not correct.
Don't you consider the Jewish community in the United States to be great supporters of the civil rights movement?
That has nothing to do with the issue.
Has nothing to do with the issue.
No. I'm on point. I like this. I'm definitely on point. So don't try to interrupt this. I want him to follow his line of faith. Your line of thinking is that the Jewish people supported black people in the civil rights movement and there was some parallel. This is a fact, this is true. But because we support the struggles of the Palestinian people does not make us anti-Semitic. It does not make us opposed to Jewish people, and there's no parallel. So now I'll take other questions.
Whites invaded Zimbabwe. We know that Ian Smith subsequently declared himself independent even from Great Britain.
Well, why does that mean that an individual farmer who may have bought the land from another individual farmer doesn't have the right to farm that land?
Because in any jurisprudence that you cannot buy anything that was illegally seized. In the U.S., if you do, you are aiding and abetting a crime.
Would you say that, so what role do you see then for whites in Zimbabwe?
The role I see for whites in Zimbabwe is to participate in the development of the country, is to continue, because there are whites in Zimbabwe who are in fact helping to develop the land. They cannot own 80% of the most arable land, and they represent maybe 5 to 10% of the population.
Or would you say that they could own 50% of the land?
I, as a person from the United States, could not say how much they should own. That is within the province of the land reform program of the Zimbabwean government.
By land reform, do you mean land seizure?
It's very interesting that BBC has never called the invasion of Zimbabwe, the seizure, the real seizure of land in Zimbabwe, seizure. It is only in 1998 and 99 when the Zimbabwean government says that we have to take back the land that was taken from us, that it becomes seizure.
What about the situation of the many thousands of black Zimbabwean farm workers who are now being thrown out of their jobs because of the seizure of the land?
Well, first of all, we have to establish fact from British media, so that I don't have the figures at my disposal. But as the British reporters have said in the New Africa magazine, that they print exactly what their editors demand, because if not, they would not have a job and would not be able to put their children through college.
So you're saying that no African workers who are on the farms now have been thrown out of their land, thrown out of their jobs by the war veterans, the so-called war veterans?
We go from thousands of black workers being thrown off their land to my saying no workers are being thrown off their land. As I said when you asked the first trick question, that I here in South Africa do not have the facts at my disposal, but the Zimbabwean government does. But what I do deny, without fear of contradiction, that the BBC's reporting is so biased and so racist that in the New Africa magazine, the August edition, they admitted so.
So what would you like to see as a settlement of the whole land question? How do you see it being resolved?
I would like to see the British government and the United States government live up to their commitment they made at Lancaster. And that is that they would reimburse the farmers for the land, and that the Zimbabwean government would have to pay for whatever improvements that those farmers had made to the land. That's what I would like to see.
Canada's position basically is they do not support reparations being on the table. And as far as declaring the transatlantic slave trade as a crime against humanity, what they're also saying is that because of the time of slavery, the crime against humanity legal statute was not in place. Hence, it's not retroactive to the transatlantic slave trade.
The fact is that the African personality, African communism, African through Nkrumah, a whole host of peoples created those human rights standards. And now we're being told the laws don't exist. It doesn't matter if the laws don't exist, because actually we're looking at the biggest temporal rip in the space-time continuum of the development of African peoples. Nobody can replace it. And to that extent, regardless of what the formal governments may say, the argument is already won. All we're talking about is making the time and getting a strategy together to deliver the outcome, which is an apology, designated a crime against human rights with substantive reparations for the contemporary impacts of slavery. I'm the son, a great-great-grandson of a slave. I can't even tell you my family's history, much past the plantation in Jamaica. Now somebody somewhere is responsible for that, and I say designate a crime against humanity. Black people of the world, unite.
We go to say the reality is that this is things that you owe. And you owe them first and foremost because you're criminals.
Absent reparations, the perpetrators of the transatlantic slave trade, slavery, colonialism, and other crimes against humanity will continue to be unjustly enriched by these crimes. The economic, social, and political development of these perpetrators is in large part due to the pillage, exploitation, brutalization, and murder of peoples in Africa, African descendants in the United States, in the diaspora, as well as other victims throughout the world. Absent reparations, the unjust enrichment will continue, fortified by structural and institutional racism, while victims will continue to be unjustly denied the benefits of their contributions to the world. We urge you to strike a blow to end racism by supporting reparations. We urge you to encourage your governmental delegates to the World Conference to set a deadline on the informal discussions being chaired by Brazil on this issue, and to allow the issue of reparations be sent to the drafting committees for inclusion in the declaration and program of action. I thank you.
The World Conference provided a unique opportunity for progressive activists to come together to have their voices heard in protest against injustices that occur in many places around the world.
March that we were planning to participate in at 5 o'clock to support the masses in South Africa against privatization, globalization, landlessness, homelessness, poverty, etc. is going on right now. There are thousands of people in the street.
Today we are still faced with a situation in South Africa where 13% of the entire population of about 40 million, 13% of 40 million controls 87% of the land. And 13%, 87% of the population is crammed into 13% of the entire land. So this is the position you are having in Zimbabwe and in South Africa currently. And we haven't moved much from that position. We have political power and freedom, but we don't have economical power in this country. So this is our position, and we are using every opportunity to demonstrate and to protest that we need full and whole freedom in this country.
We're at the NGO Convention Center. How far are they away from us? He said they won't get people from this area for an hour.
Yeah.
And I don't want to disassemble
I think.
What do we want? Reparations. Was it a crime?
Yeah.
Never give up. Never give up. Never give up. Never give up. Black power. Black power.
Now we're in the streets today, Durban, South Africa, to join the masses of the people in the tradition of the movement in the United States who supported the overthrow, dismantling of apartheid in South Africa. We are the free South Africa leaders who are in the streets in America. And we're joining the masses of the people.
Mali
All right, security, 2 abreast. Line up, 2 abreast.
This protest march, organized by COSATU, the Coalition of South African Trade Unions, invited the Durban 400 to participate in a show of solidarity in the largest mass demonstration in South Africa since the release of Nelson Mandela. And on this warm August day, tens of thousands of people marched in the streets of Durban, South Africa, against racism, privatization, globalization, landlessness, and homelessness. These issues were reflected in the signs, in the chants, and in the toy-toy, a jubilant form of protest dance that characterized the South African anti-apartheid struggle.
The wealth of whites in Africa has been built on stolen land. And so we believe that the resolution of these questions in Africa are tied to one. Land is the basis of everything. It's where people live, it's where crops grow, it's where minerals exist.
Many issues were presented at this conference, and the NGO Forum, not able to vote on resolutions, was promised their discussions would have some influence over the final outcome. However, the goal of the Durban 400 was to stay focused on the issue of reparations, and their key strategy was to concentrate on the UN Forum, where government representatives were in attendance and where their lobbying efforts would have maximum impact.
The African and African Descendants Caucus, of which the December 12th movement, particularly under the leadership of Attorney Wareham, was very much part of unifying the African community around the position initiated by the December 12th movement. And that caucus has continued its work. But for the purposes of what we're doing, all of us can't go to those meetings, which are important. We are represented in the African and African Descendants Caucus by Dr. Crawford and a few others. Our work is over here, so let's not get confused and feel guilty. We are very much a part and continue to support that caucus, but our work is over here, and we have representatives over there.
On September 3, 2001, at Africa University, the United States delegation scheduled a briefing. They were going to give an update of the conference to the U.S. NGOs, but instead they announced their withdrawal from the conference. However, the Durban 400 had plans to conduct their own briefing and staged a demonstration to protest the United States government's refusal to address the issue of reparations. This action shocked some and inspired others.
We are! What's coming? War! What's coming? War! How we gonna win? Hard way! How we gonna do it? Hard way! Reparations! Now! Reparations! Now! Reparations! Now! Reparations! Now! What do we want? Reparations! When do we want it? Now! 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 So now we should have the U.S. briefing. It will set the basis for a tribunal. The tribunal will have the perpetrators and the victims. And out of that tribunal will come rectification, which is compensation. Because this was all about economic exploitation and underdevelopment. We're not stupid. The slaves read, the slaves analyze, and the slaves fight for their freedom. So this conference belongs to African people on whose backs
this was built. That's right. This is not about xenophobia, because the basis of xenophobia is in fact the question of meager means divided among the poor, while rich people sit back and divide the world. Racism is the issue, and it's economic, but it was based on the most gross crime against humanity in the history. We don't need any other precedents. There is no precedent for 50 million bones on the Atlantic Ocean. There is no precedent for millions of people who are in fact nationless, supposedly without a culture. We are the precedent for this issue. That's right. And we're not gonna back down. That's right. We're not gonna be diverted by people who inject issues that are not the real issues. The West must pay for their crime. Belgium, the United States, the continuation of those crimes equal right up to today. Yes. Corporations, financial institutions whose backs were built on ours, still have us enslaved. Slavery continues as a basis of our underdevelopment. It is not because white people are superior, it is because we have been underdeveloped by a criminal act. And we're going to resolve that issue here. Then we're going forward because reparations has gripped the entire world. Inequality cannot be based on ideological feelings. It is based on economic deprivation. That's right. And we're going to move on that, brothers and sisters. And we believe that those are the issues of the World Conference Against Racism. If we lose that focus, then we will talk many things and accomplish nothing. Let us not lose, as my brother from Chicago says, let's not lose our focus. It was a crime. Was it a crime? Yes! Was it a crime? Yes! Against who? Humanity! So what do you want? Reparations! That ain't deep, it's real simple. Was it a crime? Yes! Against who? Humanity! So what do you want? Reparations! So what do you want? Reparations! And when do you want it? Now! So when do you want it? Now! Straight ahead. Straight ahead.
About an hour, about 5:30, we met with the State Department representatives, Howard Berlow, Steve Wagensall, and on behalf of Mike Southwick, they told us that they were withdrawing from this World Conference. They told us point blank that they will not do anything to participate in any of the drafting of documents at this point. So I think it's pointless for you all to meet with them because I don't know how if their position will change within that time.
We have an opening of what this still votes? Yeah, all those in favor of not meeting with the U.S. government, say so.
Aye.
Aye. All those who want to prefer to meet with the U.S. government, raise your hand. Aye. No hand.
So we need to strategize on how we are going to communicate a clear message to the people at home, not only about the conference, but also how we're going to go home and strategize, educate about reparations and our long-term strategies post-Durban that we need to focus on. And we need to be together and come together on a strategy to do that while we're all gathered here together.
My name is Dorothy Lewis. I'm the national co-chair of NCOBRA. I think we should congratulate the U.S. government for doing the only principled thing that it has ever done. And it is a conflict of interest for the criminal to sit at the No criminal sits at the table to decide whether or not they should be held accountable for 400 years of wrongdoing, genocide, and continuing crime. So, and we should call upon the international community and African governments to not sell us out again to the highest bidder.
I would suggest that we
put together our own delegation and have that delegation take the seats that the U.S. government is abandoning.
I'm just concerned that if the U.S. White House is going to announce tonight in 1 hour that we should have some presence on the streets tonight, as well as tomorrow morning.
When I left, the U.S. delegation was at the top of the stairs, coming in. When I got over here, the people who did South African television this morning said there's something breaking right now. It sounds like the U.S. delegation is pulling out. When we went in to do the interview, then word had come. We had already seen a press statement from the South African government on their response to this, because the understanding was that they were going to pull out, and in fact, there might be 40 other countries that might pull out with them. We went down and we took over and created the real U.S. briefing. We didn't need the U.S. government for a briefing to tell us what they were not going to get down with anyway. No illusions, as Amilcar Cabral said, tell no lies, claim no easy victories. The United States was never going to get down with this. They came in, never situated themselves, low-key, dramatic exits. All staged. During the course of stuff, they never took over any working group because they didn't want the embarrassment of dropping their work when they split. So when they got here, the plan was already in motion to split. Maybe the Durban 400 helped get their asses out of Taos. So tomorrow, we have more work to do. Yes, sir. And that work has to be, now that the shoe has fell, an assessment of what's happened. Tonight, you know, the enemy is already into plan 2, because this was all orchestrated. They now are probably trying to put pressure, particularly on people, to drop out too, to say that this conference is not legitimate. They've done it before. Our role is to deepen our solidarity without the enemy in our camp.
A white lady came out and said, "You were magnificent, sir. What is your name?" She was from New York, a little white lady. She says, "You have convinced me that what African Americans are demanding is correct." This white woman, and she was with her brother, and he was kind of scared. And he ran off. You know, we're gaining support in Britain. We've been all over Europe, talking on the BBC, 3 or 4 different stations, and so we're winning support because we're on the ground, we're collective, we're studying, we understand the trend, but we can't lose sight of the real war.
Today is a resounding victory for African people because the African group decided and were able to work out differences amongst themselves such that they will include reparations in the document. This is a major victory for African people, not only in terms of this conference, but in terms of the future of our people, where we have finally forged the type of unified struggle against imperialism and against the European countries that have benefited from the exploitation and rape of our people and our country and our land.
Did people hear the Africa Group's final statement?
No.
The World Conference recognizes that slavery, the slave trade, including the transatlantic slave trade, colonialism, apartheid, and genocide constitute crimes against humanity.
Black power.
And our major historical sources and manifestations of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance.
Yeah, that's right.
And that Africans and peoples of African descent and peoples of Asian descent and indigenous peoples have been and continue to be victims of these acts and their consequences. We win
Oh, wait a minute, can I run it off for the people?
Once the United States delegation left the conference, Belgium was asked to fill in and continue their work. The Durban 400 found this disturbing because during the 19th century, under King Leopold II, the Belgians' lust for the natural resources of the Congo, which is reported to have the most natural wealth of any country on the planet, resulted in the vile practice of mutilating the Congolese. And during the 1960s, the governments of Belgium and the United States conspired in the murder of Congo's first Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba, and the overthrow of his democratically elected government.
The other thing we have to have for tomorrow, comrade, is the indictment against Belgium for the killing of Patrice Lumumba.
Right.
Everybody's coming up to us saying, are you all going to stop Belgium? Because Belgium has stepped into the U.S.'s shoes and running the most oppressive, racist stuff they can run. So the only way in which we stop Belgium is we indict them for Patrice Lumumba's murder.
Belgium is one of the most dangerous countries in the history of Africa as far as how that small country has played a role in the devastation of Africa. We have to remember that that Belgium has been the seat of NATO for many years, and that it has also now become the home of the European Union. Belgium sees itself as the heart of Africa, as it's proclaimed in its national airport. And yet when we talk about the Congo, its role in the Congo has been one of nothing but pillage and plunder, murder and mayhem.
In Congo, the Belgians who colonized us were asking the native people there to collect a certain amount of rubber each day. If they were not able to collect that amount of rubber, then the Belgians will cut off their arms. With the money that was made from the rubber, they built an arch in Brussels called the Royal Palace. We are saying that this money should have come back to Africa, and we call that arch the Arch of Cut Arms. They cut the arms of Congolese, and this money was used to build Belgium. So Belgium now must recognize that this is a crime against humanity. I'm talking about Belgians because they are the ones who colonized Congo.
This has been a paper fight, a language fight, a 6-year fight that was initiated by attorney Roger Wareham of the December 12th movement to get one very important sentence into the final UN declaration. This battle has been won, and the United Nations Declaration now serves as a catalyst in the continuing struggle for restitution for some of the greatest crimes against humanity in world history.
France has taken a position that they agree with their parliament that the transatlantic slave trade is a crime against humanity. But to this point, the European Union is presenting a solid front. One person speaks for them, they're not breaking rank in terms of positions they're taking around the document. The South Africans proposed a compromise document that has something from the document that the Europeans put out, something from the document the Africans put out, and it's a basis for discussion. But what we want to emphasize when we're talking with our contacts is that people need to adhere to the document that was originally put out by the African group days ago. When we deal with our regional groupings, it's the same thing. When you talk with your other countries, you want to emphasize that they should protest any of this stretching out, blocking, parliamentary Roberts Rules blocking that is going on in that group that's dealing with the past, transatlantic slave trade, reparations, all those kind of things. So our work continues. We're not at any point where we can rest on our laurels. We can see the positive effects of what we've already done. We gotta see it through to the end. This is going to go down to the last minute.
You should know that our issues has been negotiated right now, and we are concerned that the languages of reparation and crime against humanity, the European Union, they're pushing to eliminate it, to change the concept. This is information we have received this evening. So we want them to know that we are here. We want them to know that we would not compromise on these two issues. And we want them to know that we're going to stand in solidarity of all the victims that are here. And together, we're going to demand they respect our will. So that's what the march is about. It's about unity and the beginning of the anti-global racial movement.
We don't have enough time, that's why I want to give the floor directly, immediately to Mrs. Viola Plano, who is the chairperson of December 12th movement.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is indeed an honor for us to meet and discuss with you some very critical issues for Africans here on the continent and Africans throughout the diaspora. We are appreciative of your time. We understand the dynamics of the discussions that are going on and have gone on to this point. So we'll get right to the meat of our concerns. In the press release that was just read, I am sure one of our concerns would be, what does it mean where it says that we will provide reparations to countries and peoples concerned? We are not clear on what that phrase means.
The World Conference recognizes that slavery, the slave trade, including the transatlantic slave trade, colonialism, apartheid, and genocide, constitutes crimes against humanity and are major historical sources and manifestations of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance, and that Africans and peoples of African descent and peoples of Asian descent and indigenous peoples have been and continue to be victims of these acts and their consequences. So the people concerned are defined in this first paragraph, which is the first paragraph of the African Common Position. So when you read paragraph 4, when you refer to providing reparations to countries and peoples concerned, you should read it in connection with paragraph 1. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The issues that were of concern to a lot of my brothers and sisters in the United States, such as the issue of the transatlantic slave trade, slavery, colonialism, apartheid and genocide, we in the Africa Group have now considered them as crimes against humanity.
Yes.
Well, we're just waiting. There's negotiations going on the document, on the language. The Africa Group, LULAC, are trying to negotiate to see if they can agree to what they think should be the language. And we just we don't know for sure what the issues are at this point.
The Latin American Caucus has now agreed to take out of their document that the transatlantic slave trade was a crime against humanity and reparations. And so the Caribbean Caucus has said that they were not consulted, that's not their position, so they have to withdraw from that caucus. I think it reinforced their position that the Africa Group has taken, and that very strongly they endorse the issue that the transatlantic slave trade, genocide, apartheid, and colonialism were crimes against humanity and should in fact be in the final document.
Many people are new to this movement. Many people have not heard about it, or they've heard about it and they've been discouraged from participating in it because they didn't feel that we could win. But they're seeing now that this is coming before the world. And so we ask them for their support, for their involvement, for their leadership, for the sharing of their resources so that we can all be victorious in this fight.
When I was talking to a lot of the ministers as well as the delegations from the African countries, it seemed that they had a new resilience to stand for our humanity as African people. And that made me very, 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 very proud.
Around the question of reparations, some of us have been
organizing for 10, 12 years around reparations, and to see it now at this level, and to be able to go back and let people understand it's an international issue now. We have allies everywhere. Ought to fuel us and motivate. I know it's motivated me and educated me to go back and do more work on the ground for another decade, if the Creator gives me that much life, to make sure that we take it to another level in the next 10 years.
I have participated here lobbying. I have interviewed people from about 10 different Latin countries where most of us don't know that there is 150 million blacks in Latin America. And especially Colombia. In Colombia alone there are 15 millions, and I have participated in their meetings. We are meeting daily. I have been in contact with New York daily, and there has been almost no media coverage of this conference and the results.
We have to get on the other side, which is back to the U.S. and to our respective local communities, and try to break this down to our communities and to get ourselves organized and to continue to function, and to also put pressure where pressure is due and not lose sight of the focus.
Day 6 of the World Conference Against Racism is moving as slowly as we had anticipated. I think we've had some major successes. One is that our intention was to expose to the world that the United States disregards the opinion of other countries in the world, and they also refuse to accept responsibility for their part in the transatlantic slave trade. Our victory is that we have firmly placed that on the agenda. Our second victory is that we have forced the perpetrators of that crime to cowardly walk out of the conference. I think the other accomplishment is the networking and unity of African people throughout the world from every continent who have clearly stated that the transatlantic slave trade, slavery, colonialism, indeed, are crimes against humanity. Day 7 will be a continuation of negotiations on what's called critical issues, like the transatlantic slave trade, like the issue of reparations, like the issue in the Middle East. When those issues come up, they're critical issues, and every parliamentary trick in the book is pulled by the West. We expect that to continue. Day 8, we might see a final draft. At the end of the conference, we might see a final draft. Our expectations is, though, that they cannot not come out of the conference with a draft declaration. The content is going to be something we've got to pay particular attention to and be extremely vigilant on, but expect the worst, but never give up the fight for the best. We hope that after Durban, that post-Durban will be the declaration, so that throughout the world we are going to attempt to organize millions for reparations and millions to conclude that the transatlantic slave trade is a crime against humanity, that colonialism is a crime against humanity, that apartheid a crime against humanity, that the Belgium's brutalization of the Congo, the brutal killing of Patrice Lumumba, is in fact one of the horrors of colonialism that has never been addressed, but that we will continue to push to have it addressed.
right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed that documentary. Very, very informative. And although I feel, in my personal opinion, we have made some great strides here in 2023, reparations is on the table more than ever before. Let's just take this all into consideration on how we can stand up for our individual human rights and hold people accountable. So, this concludes this broadcast. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Queen Mother Nina Womack. I have a multimedia company, Transmedia 360, that is focused on offering marketing and branding and multimedia services for people of African descent. As you see, we need it. We need it. And that is the work that I'm passionate about in helping our people heal. Peace.
Peace.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you were still on there. All right. Bye. All right.